Hey everybody, and welcome to another Dorico video. Today I'm going to be taking you through kind of a simple process of bringing a file over from Finale using MusicXML, but then also doing some special formatting. I get a lot of people who call me up and say, I have like 500 lead sheets programmed in Finale, and I really don't want to have to redo everything to get them into the new system. So here's a way of bringing over those files in MusicXML, getting them into the Dorico format, and also doing some fun tricks like creating transposing lead sheets so that you can have one for your trumpet player, your alto sax player, and so on. So here we go with some Music XML import in Dorico Pro 6. So the files we're working with today, I'm going to upload in the description down there. These are all public domain tunes, so you can feel free to share them as much as you'd like, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to follow along and work with what I'm doing. We're going to begin today with Ain't Misbehavin', written by the great pianist Thomas Fats Waller. And this is a fun little ditty, and I have it here in a single key transposed in concert pitch. So the first and most important thing when you're going to bring a file over from Finale into Dorico is to clear out any excess stuff. Dorico does an amazing job with importing information, but it does not capture everything. It has a hard time with text blocks that were put in with the expression tool. It has a hard time with articulations that are used for playing techniques. For example, in Finale, we used to use the articulation tool to put fingerings on notes for guitar. But in Dorico, that's done in a different system. So what really makes this system go quicker and gets your results going easier is to go ahead and remove all those excess things. I know it seems like you're losing a lot, but you'll probably find putting back in a few random articulations and text blocks won't take you that much time in the long run. You can see here on my lead sheet, I have my lyrics, I have my chord symbols, I have a tempo marking, as well as the title block, the composer block, copyright information, as well as my coda symbols. Now, all of these elements will get copied over, and we'll see that when we bring it into Dorico. One thing to note with chord symbols is because Finale would let you create literally any chord symbol you wanted, if you have any advanced chord symbols, Dorico can have a hard time importing those. Okay, now that we have our score looking pretty good in Finale, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and export that as Music XML. Now, the export settings in Finale work fine, and you don't really need to worry about any of the settings on the Finale side. You can go ahead and just export it with the default settings. This is Finale 27, so if you do have an older version of Finale, this might be a little bit different, but I have a feeling that you're probably going to be just fine. So we're going to go File, Export, and then we are going to do Music XML, and then you're just going to save that on your hard drive. Now, for a bit of contrast, I also have this version of Ain't Misbehavin' that was done in a score format. I found a few years ago that it was much simpler to create a score with all the separate transpositions baked into it and then let it create parts for each one rather than trying to actually go in and create transposing layouts. Now, I'm going to show you how to do that if you're the kind of person who wants to do it once and have the computer take care of everything. You'll notice in the score here, I have them labeled by what they are: C version, B flat version, E flat version. And in this particular case, that's going to trip up Dorico a little bit because Dorico is not going to know which instrument to give it. And so we're going to have to do a little bit of alteration when we bring it in. So let's go ahead and export this XML as well. Okay, now that we have Dorico open, there's one thing I want you to check on before you ever bring in any XML files, and that is your import settings from Dorico. So if we go under the Dorico menu and we go to Preferences, we're going to be met with this window that is all of your system preferences for Dorico. And one of the key options here is Music XML. Now you'll see that in this list, I have literally every single option unchecked. And that is actually pretty darn important. What I've noticed lately is when you pull in all of the settings from previous programs, be it Sibelius, Dorico, MuseScore, any of those, Dorico will have a hard time translating them. And what makes it work so much better and what allows you to actually use Dorico's superpowers is to go ahead and throw all of that extra stuff away and just bring in what Dorico needs. Okay, so when you import a document into Dorico, it is going to bring it in your defaults, whatever they may be. So you'll see that everything in my document looks a little bit unique because I'm using a different font set. Now there's a couple of things missing, you'll notice. One which is our copyright went away and our composer went away. And that's kind of an interesting part of the way Dorico brings things in. Dorico by default uses the project info for things like title, for copyright, for all of these things, but when it imports it from Finale, it actually puts it in a different place. So let me show you how to get that information back. So if we go under the project info, you'll see that everything is blank, but you knew that you entered info into the project info back in Finale, and that's because when Dorico brings it in, it actually puts it into a flow. So if I click on this flow 1, which is also titled Ain't Misbehavin', you'll see there is my composer and my copyright block. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click back on my project, and you'll see down here there's this copy info from dialog. And I'm going to set it to that flow, and I'm going to copy it in. And then when I hit apply, you'll see that my text blocks are now auto-populated the way they should be. Now, another element that Dorico did is it erased part of our tempo block, which is kind of a shame. And so that's simply just a matter of clicking on it and entering into the tool, and then going ahead and entering in the text info. So I had bouncy and fun, and so I'm just going to enter that text back in. Another element you may need to do, and this depends on your font sets and all the defaults you have in Dorico, is you may want to go ahead and change the font set. So let's say I want to put this back to one of Dorico's default fonts for jazz, aka Petaluma. So if I go up under Library and I go to Music Fonts, when it comes to the built-in font sets in Dorico, if I want to change pretty much everything carte blanche, in this menu, not only will it change my notation, but it'll also reformat all my text blocks for me. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Petaluma. I am going to leave these 2 checkboxes on because I want Dorico to go ahead and reset everything to the Petaluma standard. And now you can see it did a great job of translating my document. Now, again, depending on how your documents came in, if they're looking kind of lousy, if the formatting looks wrong, this is a great way of kind of resetting it back to at least some kind of standard so it looks and feels kind of normal. Okay, from here, there's a couple of other things we can do to just make sure it's working well. One thing is, because I had brought in an instrument called C version, Dorico doesn't necessarily know what to do with that. And so if I go under my play menu, you can see in Note Performer, it assigned it to flute. So if that's the instrument you're looking for, that's great. But if you want to get your playback sound to be different, you can go ahead and come under your players, and you can go ahead and you can enter in an instrument change to make it into whatever you want. Now in this case, let's say I want my playback to be guitar. So I can come in under the instrument change, and I could turn it into electric guitar and hit change. Now you will notice that that changed my player name, which also affected my layout name. So in this case, all we're going to need to do is go ahead and actually change the player name back to what we're looking for. And so I'm going to rename my player, and it's going to bring up the dialog that asks for the full name and the abbreviated name, so I'm going to change it back to C version. Now you'll see that over here in our layouts, it did change the name of the layout to match the player name. But in the score, you'll see that it's still listing it as an electric guitar. To fix this, we just need to go under our layouts, and under staves and systems, we're going to show the player name instead of the instrument name. And then we apply, and now we have it listing it the way we want. Now I could go through and change part spacing and other information here, but what I really want to show you is a way of creating transposing layouts so that if you do have a lead sheet like this and you want to, say, make a B flat part, you can really quickly just create copies of the existing layout that will then auto-transpose for you. So if we go back under Setup, over here at the layouts, what we're going to do is we're going to add a part layout. And the part layouts are the little icon where it looks like a music stand, or sometimes I think it looks like the conductor standing up maybe. Who knows? But these are the part layouts. And I'm going to create 3 different parts. One for B flat, one for E flat, and then one for bass clef. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my empty part, and I'm going to assign it the electric guitar part by coming over here under Players and checking the box. And you'll see it's going to auto-change the name of the layout, and it's going to populate it with the information from the C part. Once you have that taken care of, now we need to assign transpositions to these layouts. So what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on our new layout, and we are going to go down under Clef and Transposition Overrides. So when it brings up the Clef and Transposition Overrides document, you'll see that right now we have everything set to standard. It's going to read out of treble clef and it's going to report out treble clef. Now, because B-flat instruments typically read treble clef also, we don't need to do a clef change, but we will need to do a transposition. So you'll see down here, it has our transposition option. You'll see that it shows that a written middle C sounds as. And in this case, what we want to do is we actually want to make it sound lower, because a B-flat instrument, when it plays a C, it comes out as a B-flat. If you weren't aware of why that nomenclature is that way, that's what it means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take that C and I'm going to lower it down to the B below it. So again, you can see that the written C sounds as B-flat because it's a B-flat instrument, and then beyond that, we don't need to change anything else because this is going to automatically transpose our part into the key of our B-flat instrument. So when I hit OK, we can go over to our part now and we can rename it into what we're looking for. And in this case, we're going to call it B, but we want the flat symbol, not just the letter B. So what I'm going to do is put in a token. So I'm going to do a brace, an @ sign. I'm going to type the word flat. Then I'm going to do @brace. Now you'll see over there in the dialog, it looks like a B, but it's actually the flat symbol. So let's go over and check out that part. Okay, you can see now that the document transposed perfectly. It took the concert key of C and moved it to D, which is our transposition, but you can see it wrote it in a really high octave. This is kind of an interesting side note to the way this menu works in Dorico. And that is, if you hit the down arrow for your transposition, Dorico will take and it will list out a note, but it'll actually transpose in the down direction. And in this case, what that means, when it had a printed C in the middle of treble clef, it will go up to the written D to make it match. But if we actually go up in the little arrow, it's still going to list it as B-flat 3, but it's actually going to transpose it the other direction. So let me show you that. So if I go back into my dialog here, and I just uncheck my transpositions and hit OK, you can see that it's now back into concert pitch in the octave I had it written. So if I go back in, though, and instead of hitting the down arrow to get to my B-flat, if I hit the up arrow to get to my B-flat, you'll still see that it lists it as a B-flat 3. However, when I hit OK, you can see that the transposition actually brought it down an octave. And when we go back into the dialog, you can see it actually changed the way that it did its transposition, because you can see now it changed it over to having this concert pitch transposition as well. Basically, all that did is it moved things around by an octave. So the easiest way to think about this is when you do the transposition, if it looks like it's in the wrong octave, go ahead and clear that out, and then go back and use the other direction of the arrow to do the transposition. So let's do that on our E-flat part. Now, I already know that I'm going to want the E-flat part to be lower on the stave. I don't want it to go up, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the up arrow so that when I do this, Dorico will flip it over. And I know that seems backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go up to E flat, click OK. Then I'm going to switch my view over to that part, and you'll see that it put it in the correct octave for my alto sax transposition. Now all I need to do is rename that part. Again, we want that token, so it's going to be brace at flat at brace. And now we have the E flat version. So finally, we have the transposition for the bass clef. Now this one you might think, well, it doesn't transpose. You're right, it doesn't. So we have a couple of options here. One, we can just set a new clef. B, we can do a transposition and a new clef because we might want to change the octave as well. So what we're going to do is where it says clef for first stave, we're going to check that box on and we're going to set it to bass clef. And then for the concert pitch next to it, I'm going to go ahead and also set that to bass clef. Now, after applying that setting, you might think to yourself, well, wait a minute, it didn't change anything. It's still written in treble clef. And that's because there is another interesting aspect when you bring in a document from Finale. Finale treats clefs as objects. And so what happens is, in a Finale document, when you bring it in Music XML, Dorico will put in a clef that will override clef changes. What does this mean? Well, under the right menu, if I just highlight that clef and hit the delete key, you'll see that Dorico took away that overrided clef and will put the part back to the way it should look because I had changed it to read in bass clef. Now you can see this is completely in the wrong octave, so we are going to have to do a transposition. So back in my transposition dialog, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set my written transposition to C4 for both the transposition and for the concert pitch. And the reason for it is C3 was my standard. And what I want it to do is I want it to display lower, so I need C3 to be a higher note. And again, I know that seems backwards, but basically what we're doing is we're going to push it down an octave. Now that's looking pretty good, but it's still got a ton of ledger lines. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to move that down another octave. So we're going to change this to C5. And again, for my concert pitch, I also want it to read in C5 because I don't want it to transpose the octaves when I go to concert pitch view. There we go. Now it brought everything back down into the staff so that it's actually a little more readable. Again, I'm going to rename the part, and this time I'm going to call it bass clef. And now you can see from just simply my first version, I have a C version, I have a B flat version, an E flat version, and a bass clef. And I only had to do the music once. I didn't actually have to create a full score. So if you do have just a simple song or a lead sheet and you need to do a quick transposition, or if you just want to have this one song, say, in 6 different keys, this is a way of creating those without having to renotate it or create an official score. Fortunately, because Dorico treats these parts independently, you can go ahead and you can do any page formatting you want to these parts individually. However, do note that everything is drawn from that one singular part in the score, meaning if you change any note or any chord in the first part, it will change it on all of them because they are now completely linked together. Okay, so now we can open up that score version of Ain't Misbehavin'. And again, we can quickly go in and we can change our font sets. And we can come into our setup and we can rename our instruments. Now you can see that what Dorico did is it thought my instrument was called version, and so it has 3 different versions, which is kind of annoying to say the least. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do my instrument changes. So I'm going to change this to an electric guitar for my concert pitch instrument. Then I'm going to change my B flat instrument into trumpet. And my last instrument, I'm going to go ahead and change this one into alto saxophone. Now again, this is the way I typically do a lead sheet, because now each one of the transpositions is an independent part, so I can make infinite number of changes. And frankly speaking, if I make a change to one, I can just copy and paste it into the other parts. It also takes care of the transposition for me, so I don't have to use that dialog we just looked at. It'll actually take care of it, all of it for me. Now, the one thing I will have to do is go back and change my player names. So again, I'm going to right-click on my player and rename. And because this was the alto sax, this one is going to be the E flat. So I'm going to do my tokens. A quick tip here, if you highlight the token and hit copy, that way every time you need to use that flat token for the rest of this procedure, you can just paste it in. My trumpet is our B flat instrument, so I'm going to go ahead and do my B, pasting the token. And then my guitar player is going to be my C version. And then finally, the bass clef, that one is going to be bass clef and BC. Now I can go back into my layout, and with the exception of a little bit of page formatting and spacing, this part's ready to go. Okay, with a couple of quick clicks, I now have the document looking the way I want. I have my rehearsal markers, I have my fonts, I have my codas and my two codas, and so everything is looking pretty darn good. So hopefully you found this video useful. Again, if you're importing Music XML, it is my recommendation to get rid of all those import settings and to go in and sanitize your Finale document a little bit. Think about some of the special characters you might have input in there. If you did put some pretty difficult things in there, think about letting those go, because they can really be a hindrance to your overall import process. Thanks so much for watching. And again, if you haven't watched my videos on page formatting, part formatting, I have a whole series in this playlist. And let me tell you, it's really handy information, and it definitely will speed up your workflow. Keep checking back at the channel, and if you're liking the content, please subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.